I'm delighted to introduce Cari Randa-Beaulieu, who is not only our guest speaker today, but also our new Provincial Coordinator for Knowledge Mobilization here at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. And Cari is a recent graduate of the SFU Masters in Gerontology program, and she brings a number of years of research, project management experience, along with 5 years as an art therapist in long-term care, assisted living, and community settings. So Cari completed a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology at SFU and then trained at Vancouver Art Therapy Institute, where she tailored her practice to older adults living in long-term care through adaptive art making methods. And so today, Cari's going to be sharing some insights and learnings from DemSCAPE, a community-based research project that aims to understand ways to make neighborhoods more inclusive for people affected by dementia. And so in her previous role as the DemSCAPE Project Manager, she worked with teams across the province to identify physical barriers within neighborhoods that can be addressed by adopting dementia-inclusive guidelines for policymakers, decision makers, and the public. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Cari. Welcome, Cari.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Heather. You got all the beats of my journey from long-term care to community to now with the research and knowledge mobilization team here at the Alzheimer Society of B.C. And I'm so excited to have my two worlds come together. So I am thrilled to be presenting on our project called DemSCAPE. It's quite a mouthful, so I will say its full name once, but we'll call it DemSCAPE from here on out. So it's the Dementia-Inclusive Streets, Community Access, Participation, and Engagement Project. It was a 3-year study funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada, as well as the Alzheimer Society research program, and it was a collaboration between Simon Fraser University, the University of British Columbia, and the University of Northern British Columbia. Our project leads are gerontologists, nurse educators, urban planners, as well as social workers. So it's quite an interdisciplinary project. But before we get much further, Heather mentioned knowledge mobilization a few times, and that's definitely a term that we'll come across a few times today. So in my role as Provincial Coordinator, Knowledge Mobilization, I have the pleasure of taking research and figuring out how to translate it or turn it into something engaging that makes sense for different groups who can use that knowledge in a practical way. So depending on the country and the field of study, the exact word pairing can vary. Sometimes it's called knowledge translation, sometimes knowledge exchange, or even knowledge dissemination. Especially in the social sciences, we use knowledge mobilization as an umbrella term to describe all the activities and outputs that a research project produces to help build awareness and enable the use of the research to turn evidence-based knowledge into action. And that's part of what really excites me about the DemSCAPE project. So another word that we'll be coming across is neighborhood-built environment, which is also quite a mouthful. And it might be new to some people here today. I know when I was getting started with DemSCAPE, I thought it sounded very intimidating. I don't have a background in architecture or urban planning, like Heather mentioned. I came from healthcare, so it felt like this whole new world with a lot of new language. And I knew about design, but I didn't know anything about how design relates to cities or neighborhoods. So I know we have the chat function. So I would just love to invite anyone to add their ideas or initial thoughts about what neighborhood built environment might mean, or what might be something that exists in the neighborhood built environment. Yeah, Nancy, great suggestion, signage and wayfinding. From Jacob, schools and playgrounds. Health Canada defines the built environment as part of our physical surroundings and includes the buildings, parks, schools, road systems, and any other infrastructure that we encounter in our daily lives. So things like signage, schools. Yes, and accessibility is a great consideration when we think about our neighborhood built environment. So today, I hope that by the end of our time together, um, you'll be able to recognize the importance of neighborhood built environment in supporting the outdoor participation of people living with dementia, be able to identify supportive or unsupportive features of the neighborhood built environment to start conversations or even initiate interventions. And I hope to leave you with all of the links and resources to access and share public engagement tools to help challenge stigma surrounding living with dementia in the community. So some big goals for today, but I think we can do it. And also just acknowledging that most of us probably aren't secretly urban planners or urban designers. So I really hope to leave you with the start of a new knowledge base. So a little bit of background to this study. Almost 60% of older adults living with dementia reside in the community. And the neighborhood built environment has a key role in out of home activity and influences the health and well being of people living with dementia, as well as care partners and those affected by dementia. The neighborhood built environment is regarded as a setting that can offer support, as well as a sense of safety and provide opportunities for community engagement and social participation through neighborhood-based services, amenities, um, and other supportive features to support aging in place. As well, the range of physical and social activity spaces and places tends to shrink throughout the dementia journey, which is also called the shrinking world effect, which can be isolating among other health and social risk factors. However, thankfully, this is where dementia-friendly and inclusive communities comes into play. So a dementia-friendly and inclusive community, as defined by Alzheimer's Disease International, is a place where people living with dementia and their care partners are empowered, supported, and included in society, understand their rights, and recognize their full potential. But research on the built environment and dementia inclusive planning is relatively sparse. So this creates this importance for evidence-based neighborhood design to help support people living with dementia, maintaining both community connections and independence for as long as possible, leading us to the goals of the DemSCAPE study, which identify destinations that people visit, as well as changes in the patterns of those visits over time, and identify the neighborhood built environmental features that affect their outdoor mobility, engagement, and social participation. DemSCAPE is actually the first study focusing on this area in Canada, and more studies are starting to get going looking at this area because support of spatial navigation and mobility can also contribute to the prevention of progression of dementia. So this is one area where we can really promote healthy aging and aging in the right place. So, what do we know about the neighborhood built environment and dementia friendly design features so far? Six principles have been identified of dementia friendly neighborhoods that have been established through previous research. So, this is familiarity, comfort, accessibility, like what came up in the chat, distinctness, legibility, and safety. So for the DemSCAPE study, 32 community dwelling people living with mild to moderate dementia or mild cognitive impairment and their care partners participated in a series of interviews. So we did 4 over time. In northern BC, we had 6 participant dyads, so pairs in Prince George, and in Metro Vancouver, we had 11 individuals and 15 pairs. So dyads refer to participant pairs where the person with lived experience was supported by a care partner who is usually a spouse, an adult child, or a close friend. And to give you an idea of what these walk along interviews looked like, here are some photos from what's on my left is during our pilot, um, showing that we engaged participants through mixed methods, sequential design, which is a fancy way of saying that we did 4 interviews. The focus today will be on the walk along interviews. And a walk along interview is like a guided tour, and it took place in each participant's neighborhood on a route of their choice. And to give you a better idea of what the walk along interviews looked like, here I am in the pilot wearing our head mounted GoPro camera. So that was to really try and capture our point of view. So I'm standing about 3 or 4 meters behind our person with lived experience. And then on the next image is one of our later interviews where a person with lived experience is crossing the street, and you can really see the view from the camera. But they had a GoPro on their walker. So some participants chose to wear a GoPro camera on a hat mount, on a walker, on a backpack strap. So really trying to capture that point of view and being able to see what they're seeing as they navigate their neighborhood. So through these walk along interviews, we have identified these 5 aspects that influence outdoor walking experience. So the first being physical aspects. These are things like the features and processes. So like we mentioned before, what are the roads like? What sort of signage is out there to help with wayfinding? Then cognitive aspects. These are how someone makes their decisions for wayfinding. Social aspects, and then psychosocial and emotional aspects like belonging and memories, as well as temporal aspects, so the role of time. So let's take a look at a few examples from our walk along interviews. So the first being physical, the physical environment. So neighborhood physical environment can facilitate or hinder walking experience through the terrain, the ambient conditions, like the weather, light, temperature, sidewalk condition and maintenance. This participant drew attention to the heaving cracks in the sidewalk, saying, "You see this unevenness here? One has to be careful with them," as well as sidewalk width and clear space. Places to rest like benches, features that enable access like ramps and railings, and the presence of frequent designated pedestrian road crossings with appropriate time and adequate signals to other road users. So having a crosswalk is great, but having enough time to get across the road and being able to make sense of which side of the crosswalk is beeping, those are all important features that have a role to play. They seem so simple when we say it out loud, but when you're in the moment, it's so easy to not think about this. So another one is familiarity. Supportive cognitive aspects involve experiencing familiarity and understanding neighborhood environments, so including taking familiar routes to destinations, knowledge of neighborhood layout, and identifying streets using names, numbers, familiar naming systems. So this participant said, "I still often get these street names confused because one is street and one is avenue, so I sometimes get them backwards." So the city of Surrey is a good example for this, where there's 97A or 97 Street. And if you're not really familiar with that system, it can be very confusing. And the environment can promote orientation and wayfinding when streets have good sight lines, meaning that a person can notice cues to navigate to their destination, and even better when you can see the building that you're trying to get to. Or by following transit routes with good signage, like some of the bus stops that have really clear identification for what the route line is or what the end goal is, as well as landmarks like residences, businesses, amenities, public spaces, and artwork. And there's definitely been a trend toward more public artwork in Metro Vancouver building projects, like this participant drew attention to. They said, look at the artwork over there. Different, eh? Different is good. I look for it. And you might notice that some of these features could be beneficial in multiple aspects of those 5 aspects that I touched on before. So a piece of public art can provide psychosocial and emotional stimulation, but can also be a way to promote wayfinding and in turn foster independence by being able to orient yourself and know where you're going. And social support. Positive social interaction and social support is fostered when community members have dementia awareness and sensitivity, so people living with dementia can feel comfortable and safe accessing direct or indirect support from others. Spontaneous social connections are important to this participant, who described herself as a touchy-feely kind of person. I often stop and talk to people. The reason I stopped is because I recognize this dog. Many of our participants recognize the value of saying hello or even sharing a smile with anyone they encountered on their routes, especially being hopeful that others might reciprocate that friendliness if they did come to ask for support. Study participants also identified participating in advocacy and city planning initiatives as an avenue for positive social interaction and social support. Some of our participants were seasoned advocates, while others were participating in research for the very first time. But they all looked at sharing their lived experiences as a way to make a difference in their communities and participate in this larger change. But you don't have to take my word for it. 3 of our study participants can tell you far better than I can about their experiences walking in their neighborhoods. So with the help of a professional videography team, we created a short documentary about the walk-along interview process with the goals of educating on the role of built environment and its role in dementia-friendly and inclusive communities, challenging stereotypes, and to inspire action that includes people living with dementia in municipal decision-making and planning processes. I'm so happy to be able to share the 8-minute version with you all today. And without further ado, let's watch.
Awesome. So we will walk both of us first, and then both of them will follow. Right on.
Because of my disease, I'm not able to drive. I like to get out in the fresh air. I think that that's important for my health and well-being, getting the blood pumping to my brain.
Walking is really good for you, you know, and good for your mind, good for your brain, and good for your physical. I walk everywhere in here. Walk to shopping in the Victoria Drive, and walk to see the doctor, and walk to see the dentist, walk to see get the medicine.
I realized right from the beginning that there was something not quite right, and it's gradually gotten worse, but I accept it because it's part of life. I'm old enough and good looking enough that I can accept that sort of thing, and you can quit snickering.
my neighborhood is convenient because it does offer, within walking distance, a lot of amenities that I need, and that's important to me. The three things that are important are social connectiveness, having a lot of friends, talking, keeping your brain active, socializing. The other thing is exercise, having the blood pumped to the brain. And then the other thing is having a passion. So if you have a passion, then you have a purpose in life, and I think that's really helpful, especially with a diagnosis of dementia.
Oh, I think, well, it's important at any time, really, but I think you need to keep moving, because if you're just sedentary, it doesn't take long. If you don't use it, you lose it.
That's the same with your brain.
Yeah.
See this road, I get lost.
Is it here?
Yeah. See, because I turn back here, it's more tree, right? Shade. It's not that hot. That day is really hot. Maybe like you said, too hot, just make me confused. Recently, 2 times I get lost, you know. One time I go to the Vancouver mayor, you know. And then when I come out, I just, which way to go? I'm very nervous. And then one time, and then very hot, the summer very hot one day, you know, and then I go to ESL class. And then when I come out, I go to walk different way, you know. I supposed to go to the, you know, to the 48th Avenue and then turn to the Nemo. And then when I go in, I say, where am I? I get lost. The house all different, and the tree is different, roads different, everything different. They change it. They plant a young tree here some years gone, you know. Then they build a new thing here not very long ago. I think 2-3 years ago. And then I am so nervous. I don't know what to do. And then I run, almost running to the, and then I see the Naval Park, and then, oh, now I know where I am. If I see the Naval Park, you know, the side there, if I see the park, and then I know I'm home pretty soon. So they write down that Naval Park, that's very clear. Yeah. I like clear. Sometimes they think that.
Oh, the sign you
see,
mean?
the sign very clear.
Right.
That's why that day I get lost. I see the Naval Park, I'm very comfortable. I know the park have the bathroom. And then more easy for me, you know, to go to bathroom. No, before 7 years ago, I'm okay. I don't have to go bathroom that often. But now recently, you know, I have to go bathroom all the time. I get lost 2 times already. So I'm worried I get worse, you know, later, so.
I think there has to be very good signage at intersections. What they're doing now is putting even on bus shelters, the cross sections, so that people know where they are. On the street, there is a fluorescent, it shines in the dark, the name of the street, the cross section both ways. You can see where you are. I think that in the middle of Richmond, there's some intersections that have yellow markings when you're coming up to a curb. That's helpful. Some of the challenges, for the most part, would be the sidewalks are a little bit uneven and have dips and bumps and cracks. So that you have to be very careful not to trip. I have to make sure I lift my feet up and watch where I'm going so I don't fall. I have fallen a couple of times in the past with that.
Careful, watch out.
Well, a lot of times people will ride their bikes on the sidewalk.
That happens to us.
Yeah, and it's hard because they just come up on you, and I have a, sometimes I weave a bit, you know, so they, you know, go one side or the other with unconsciously, and they might hit me, and almost have hit me, you know.
You find the odd branch that you don't want to trip on, but that's about it. No sidewalk, keep left facing traffic.
Yep.
at this corner here, where do you go, or how do you get back to your place from here?
Straight along here.
So you walk along the grass here?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? And why do you choose to do that?
So I don't have to go across to get on the sidewalk. Sometimes I go over there on the sidewalk, but I don't walk along the road if I don't absolutely have to. No matter where you go in North America, it is geared to driving. It is not geared to walking.
You guys mentioned that you fell a couple times. Are there things like that that you get concerned about?
Yes, because if I step in there the wrong way, without having Charlie with me, if I step in there the wrong way, then I could go face first.
He didn't have the walker when he fell.
Oh, okay.
That's why we made it.
Yes, and you feel more comfortable
I feel
with.
more comfortable about it.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
he feels right about it, I do it.
Right.
You don't want to step in a pothole. The only thing I can really say about this whole scenario, it might not help me, it might not help her, but hopefully it will help somebody else.
So a huge thank you to our video participants, Lynn, Esther, and Niels, who shared their experiences, as well as the production team for making that video possible, and all of our research assistants and investigators at the different universities. It took a large team to make a short video happen. So by combining our video stills, transcripts, GPS data, we've been able to identify the key wayfinding features of the neighborhood built environment from the perspective of our study participants. And from our findings, we've developed these 3 key resources. So the short video that we just watched together that's available on our website, but also on YouTube as well for easy sharing. And as well, an environmental audit tool for community-based dementia advocacy organizations, as well as people living with dementia, to audit their neighborhoods and be able to identify intervention projects. And then I will jump into this in a second, but we also were able to create Canada's first set of dementia-inclusive planning and design guidelines. So these help inform municipal planners and decision makers on physical planning and design to start thinking about dementia while initiating planning processes and really building accessibility into design instead of having to retrofit later. So I'll share a little bit about our planning and design guidelines. So we know that well-being can look different. Well-being considerations can look different for people and different communities. So our key audiences for these planning and design guidelines are municipalities, developers, community organizations, but also people affected by dementia. This is a way to learn more about these features and be able to advocate. So throughout the development of these guidelines, we also received feedback from advocacy organizations and groups, and have even received feedback from seniors housing organizations as well. So this has a lot of information on one slide, but this is like a high-level overview of all of the 3 design realms. So we looked at these strategies and actions at 3 different scales. So the first being the neighborhood scale. So this is high-level urban planning and design decisions with strategies and actions at each of the 3 scales. So getting smaller and smaller. So first being neighborhood, second being the street scale, and then the third being the detailed design scale. And this is where we as community members have power to start making changes. Basically, as soon as we see something, we can change it. This is things like overgrown shrubs and clearing off the sidewalk. So this document is available as a PDF, also in that helpful resources document. And no matter where you're coming from, there are some interesting pieces to learn from it. We partnered with the urban planning and consulting group Happy Cities in creating these guidelines, and they did an amazing job making these really beautiful graphics and really distilling all of this information into a digestible guide. So another key question, how could you use the guidelines? So it's a way to learn about the environment, how it works at a planning and design level, as well as being able to build a shared language for community members and city planners, identifying community areas or hotspots that could be improved. I recognize some names in our session today, and I think some folks may have participated in the SWAN project. So getting involved in research is another great way to put these guidelines into action, as well as making or suggesting changes at the detailed design scale. So those frequently visited places like the library or a community center, is there something that could be more accessible, and knowing who to talk to start making those changes. So with that, we have had the absolute pleasure of being able to extend our reach to communities in the Lower Mainland through our formal partnership with the City of Burnaby and the City of Richmond. So since September, we began a MyTax-funded knowledge mobilization extension, continuing our collaboration with these 2 cities to conduct screenings and group discussions using this short video along with a photo exhibit in what we called World Cafes, which I'll speak to in a couple slides, as well as focus group discussions with municipal planners to really dig into how the planning and design guidelines can work for their cities. And finally, more walking audits. So later this summer and into the fall, one of my colleagues will be facilitating walking audits in Burnaby and Richmond to really hone in on those hotspots for future city projects. Our team also worked with the City of Vernon, which is a hub city of BC's Northern Okanagan region, to co-develop and evaluate a stigma reduction training for city staff, as well as provide guidance on their recently passed age-friendly and dementia-inclusive city plan. So I'm going to close with a summary of our World Cafe process for community engagement, which we completed in March of this year. So World Cafes are a way to foster collaborative discussions, but they're also a research method. We co-hosted World Cafes with our municipal partners with Burnaby and Richmond in February and March. Our team opened the events with a brief presentation. We watched the video together, and then we really dove into a discussion based on a discussion guide, and which is also available on our website, to be able to connect people living with dementia and care partners with municipal planners, to really invite those relationships between community members and municipal planners who are the ones making and designing these civic projects. And of course, raising awareness and building an education base on dementia-friendly and inclusive neighborhood built environment. So at each World Cafe, we had 20 to 25 municipal and community organization staff, people living with dementia and care partners, organized into 5 or 6 groups. And both events had a total of 40 participants, including our project staff and volunteers. Each was located at a program room, at a public library, or at an active living center. And these locations enabled us to showcase our photo exhibit at the same time and have that open to the public. So the photo exhibit was a way that we could showcase some photos that were identified by our research assistants who were out in the field for the walk-along interviews. And we asked visitors to the photo exhibit, what does a dementia-friendly community mean to them? And responses were received in English and Chinese. And some of the responses included safe and even sidewalks. People talk about dementia, as well as more crosswalks. The sticky notes have been photographed, and volunteers from the University of British Columbia Idea Lab are in the process of translating the sticky notes, and will use them for future community engagement and knowledge mobilization purposes. So it's been really wonderful to have all of these collaborations and teamwork across universities, disciplines, and we've been able to work on so many tools that are now publicly available. And as a trainee, I was able to learn about knowledge mobilization through practical experience and enhanced my skills as a community engaged researcher. And I definitely wouldn't be here in my new role as Provincial Coordinator Knowledge Mobilization without that practical experience and building these relationships. I'd like to close this part of the presentation by just expressing my gratitude once again for all of the partners and collaborators who contributed to this extension of the DemSCAPE project and shaped our many tools and resources that I am so thankful to be able to share with you all today. And so with that, a huge thank you to our video participants, our video production team, our funders at the Public Health Agency of Canada, the Alzheimer Society of British Columbia, the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and other funding sources, and our municipal partners in Burnaby and Richmond as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Sarah and Heather for any questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Cari, for that wonderful presentation on DemSCAPE. There is so much going on in that project, and it continues, as Heather will reference later on. So we would love to hear from participants today. So if you've got questions for Cari, please throw them in the chat, and we'll work through them. And for now, maybe we can ask the audience one of your questions, Cari, around elements in our participants' neighborhoods. So do you want to throw that out there? I think it's such a good question.
Yeah, so after seeing Esther, Lynn, and Niels talk a little bit about their neighborhoods, I am curious to hear if anyone can relate to specific challenges, or what would you like to see change in your communities?
That's such a great question. Yeah, what are some either some things that are really bugging you, or possible solutions that you think that could make your communities more dementia inclusive? So as
And
we
and feel free to unmute. That would be fabulous.
Yeah, this is Naomi. I'm calling in from the Yukon. Yeah, there's a lot. I was going to ask if you have any experience with or are going to work with communities who are rural and remote. Here in Whitehorse, it's a city, but it also qualifies for a lot of those markers that would call it rural remote. One of the things that one of our citizens brought up that was in the news recently was that a lot of the sidewalks aren't plowed in the winter. So for anyone, regardless of whether you have dementia, anyone with mobility concerns, or just wanting to walk down the block to go to mail a letter or something, they can't use the sidewalk for several weeks of the year. So there's several things like that that we can definitely improve to make it dementia friendly and senior friendly.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Definitely in our work in Prince George as well, sort of similar, where it almost qualifies as rural and remote, but is still a pretty huge city by comparison to other truly rural and remote places. But that issue of like it's not a sidewalk, it's a gravel alleyway. And in the video, we saw Niels picking up his walker and going through the grass because there's no sidewalk on that side of the street, and he would have to cross 4 lanes of traffic to get to the sidewalk because there's also no crosswalks. So that's definitely a huge issue. And in our work with the city of Vernon as well, working with their sort of environment management team with the city to have more support in place for don't just plow the roads. And when you plow the roads, make sure that the snow doesn't go directly onto the sidewalk. Being able to have that awareness and ongoing revision of city processes to keep the environment accessible.
Yeah, that's such a great response, Cari. And I think, I don't know, we live in Canada. I don't know why this is a surprise that sidewalks need to be cleared. And it's really just good practice for everyone, right? I mean, wheels, lots of people use wheels. I'm thinking of strollers, parents trying to push their young children around in the winter time. So definitely something that needs to be addressed across the province for sure. Thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. I'm just going to bring our attention to a couple questions that are in the chat. Sarah Leah mentioned public art and engaging with public art. And I'll just read it. I've heard from previous staff working in dementia-friendly communities that public art can provide some challenges for those experiencing or who are on a dementia journey. So benches that are shaped in, say, non-bench form makes it hard to recognize. So do you have any thoughts on that, Cari, around making art accessible, but not in ways that are then deterring people from using it?
Yeah, totally. That comes back to those 6 dementia-inclusive design principles. So familiarity, like public art is wonderful if it is more of a wayfinding or placemaking feature, like that metal tree that we saw before, but something that should be functional, like a bench. It's about finding that happy medium between, is it still recognizable as a bench? And you want to make sure that it's providing its fundamental purpose first. And yeah, I know there's a great example of a bench outside a library that looks like books, but it's not always not always the best choice.
Thanks, Cari. Sarah Leah says thank you. Okay, and we've got a question from Gordon Fulton. So, as a pedestrian, I'd like to know what to expect of drivers at a crosswalk, brackets with a flashing light, and what to expect of drivers at a 4-way stop. Behavior of drivers at both of these places varies unpredictably. Gordon, yes, let me echo how confusing it is for some people when you get to a four-way stop and who goes first. So Cari, was that something that was talked about in the DemSCAPE project?
Yeah, I think across the board, it was having really designated crosswalks, like where there's a not just a yellow flashing light for drivers, but like a red light that says stop. Um, those pedestrian controlled crossings where you press a button and a yellow light flashes. Generally, we would hope that drivers would stop at those. But four-way intersections are definitely a little bit more of a wild card. And yeah, I think depending, part of it is having consistent crossings in specific municipalities or neighborhoods. So not having lots of different kinds of crosswalks in one area. So that way it is more consistent. So drivers can behave ideally in more consistent ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so that pedestrians can feel comfortable and confident using those crossings.
Thanks, Cari. And I know that I don't always feel confident, even with designated pedestrian. And so I'm the crazy lady waving her hands frantically at everyone to stop. So thanks a lot for your question, Gordon. That's a great one. And so as others maybe are thinking about questions or comments that they may have for Cari about DemSCAPE, I had a question around, how participants were engaged in that video that you created, because that's such a wonderful resource to come out of DemSCAPE. How were they engaged? What do you think they got out of the process?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that. I have a personal bias because I was quite involved in the production process, but I really feel like the video is such a gem from this project and really helps make sense of something kind of loose like neighborhood built environment. Through our walk along interview process, had the GoPro videos from each participant. So part of the original application for this project was the commitment to create a short video. And it just made sense to build off of that walk along process. So we had completed enough interviews at that point to sort of identify who might be an interesting and engaging person to feature. So in collaboration with the video production team and our research assistants, we had a series of meetings to sort of identify what's a good variety of experiences. So Lynn was very independent and well connected to Richmond. Esther and her husband Chung participated together. And then Niels and Maureen were in Prince George. So we really wanted to highlight that sort of more northern experience as well in the video. And that felt really important to us. So once we had sort of honed in on who we thought might be great to feature, we set up some conversations just to say, would you be interested in doing this? And then once we got the okay, let's do it, then we set up a meeting on Zoom. This was the fall of 2022. So we were still sort of on the heels of the pandemic. So still sort of going in between in-person and Zoom. So having a meeting with the video production team to chat about what our participants might want to have featured in the video, and really gauging their comfort and consent to be filmed, which was of course huge. And then things progressed quite quickly from there because of course Prince George in the fall, weather is a huge concern. So We filmed in October in Metro Vancouver and November in Prince George, and we were so incredibly lucky that it was not freezing or snowing at the time. And then it was really just video editing from there, and then some collaborative editing and, okay, here's our rough cut. Does this look good? And then we got to premiere it at a conference, and the rest is history.
Well, it's a wonderful video, and you can tell that, you know, those that participated really enjoyed themselves. You can tell that they enjoyed the process of sharing what their experiences are navigating their neighborhoods. Thanks, Cari.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I was really curious around the engagement from these key findings with municipal planners. So trying to you know, offer these guidelines. And so can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what's happening with these guidelines and how these planners are being engaged in terms of thinking about what they can do to improve either immediately now and also planning for the future?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really excellent question. Part of our extension of the project has been a series of focus groups that my colleague Kishore Sitharaman has been facilitating with Burnaby and Richmond. So really, it hasn't been a one and done engagement of our partner municipalities. We had representatives at the World Cafes that I facilitated, and then 2 focus groups, and then through his part of this extension project, the municipal representatives will also be going out on these walking audits to identify the hotspots. So they'll be seeing and hearing firsthand from people with lived experience, their perspective of these specific hotspots where there is interest and pre-existing discussions to start intervention projects to try and make it better and innovate solutions. So it really is an ongoing partnership, as well as next steps to make these guidelines more formally accepted as part of planning and building processes. So yeah, it's just like a mind-blowingly huge collaboration.
That's amazing. And I just want to say that I had the privilege of sitting in on one of these planning discussions. I won't say which city, but just that the planners are very responsive, it seems, and they believe it's the right thing to do, and it is, to incorporate these guidelines as best as they can. So yeah, this is wonderful.
And just echoing that that sort of sentiment that came up, that accessible design is good design, and it really does benefit everyone, from people with strollers to mobility aids, neurodivergent folks.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. Well, okay, so there's no other questions in the chat, but you know what? If something comes to mind, please feel free. And maybe I will invite Dr. Heather Cook back onto the call. Hi, Heather.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Cari, so much for taking time out of your day to share all of that knowledge, and to all of you for joining in today. Some really great questions, and really interesting to hear about your own neighborhoods as well. So the first study on the slide there that's noted is around reimagining bereavement. So we're really only starting to grasp that full experience of grief during times of crisis, and including the COVID-19 pandemic. So what this study is doing is identifying some of the unique challenges and needs of community dwelling older adults and aging families to better support the bereavement process. So if you happen to be over the age of 65, or you know someone who is, who lives in the community in your own home or their own home or apartment, and have experienced a death of a family member between March and December 2020, and would like to share your bereavement experience, you can reach out to Sam Teichman, who's a PhD candidate at Simon Fraser University, and you can share your experiences in a one-on-one interview. So her contact information is on the slide there. The second opportunity on the slide is a Sleep Health Equity Engagement Project, which the researchers have come up with the acronym of SHEEP, always a cute one when you're talking sleep. And they're looking at what matters most to getting a good night's sleep. So it's a national research study specifically targeting equity deserving groups who feel that their health concerns might not be being heard. And so if you are interested in learning more and potentially joining the steering committee as someone with lived experience and who has access to the internet to be able to access the virtual meetings, then you can reach out to sleep.engage@ubc.ca. And then the last study on the slide here is the one to which Cari was referring just now, around looking at the accessibility of streets in your city. And so if you are someone who lives with mild or moderate dementia, or is caring for someone who lives with mild or moderate dementia, and you'd like to share your experiences, we encourage you to reach out to Kishore, and his contact information is on the screen there as well. So if you're interested, there's always opportunities, and we're always happy to share those with folks. Thank you to everyone for sharing part of your afternoon today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.